Well, as Philip was explaining, the Moskva is the flagship vessel of the Russian fleet, having previously been deployed in the Mediterranean during the height of the Syrian conflict. So just how important is it and how serious might its loss be? Let's talk to Dr. Alessio Patalano, Professor of War and Strategy at King's College in London. Professor, what is your analysis? How significant is this warship and the damage that we think it might have sustained?
Good afternoon. That's an excellent question. And of course, some of the details will have to be clarified in due course. What we know for sure that the two stories are not incompatible. Could very well be, as the reporter was suggesting, that the missiles damaged the warship and created the reasons for the fire to take place. And then the fire might have escalated on its own. What we will know for sure, whether it sinks or not, it doesn't really matter, because militarily, this piece of equipment is going to be out of action. For the Moskva, the war is finished. Now, how it ends, it's almost militarily irrelevant, because the consequences, militarily speaking, are quite dramatic. This was not just the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, it was also the platform that was designated to provide the majority of air cover to the rest of the fleet operating. So the element of conducting any other sort of major operation from the sea now is in dispute, is uncertain, is certainly standing on much weaker legs than it was before this happened. But symbolically, I think, the point that was mentioned briefly earlier, this is very important. This is not any ship. This is the Moscow on fire. It gives a very strong, powerful signal of a situation that is reversing, of control that is denied by Ukrainian action. And on top of that, this was the ship that in the very early stages of the war was involved into the events around Snake Islands. So it was a very top priority target for the Ukrainian forces from a maritime perspective. And so this is very much the situation in which David is telling Goliath, a very discombobulated Goliath, you are not safe here. Even if you're big and strong, this doesn't make that you're not vulnerable.
We have spent seemingly 50 days talking about a land invasion. Just how important is the Russian naval effort in this conflict, which has mostly been seen, I think, as a land battle until now?
You are absolutely right. The function that the Navy plays and the maritime forces are playing is very much in support of land operations. And obviously, when the core of the operations was in the northern part of Ukraine, support was much more limited. We've seen some missile strikes from maritime position. But of course, now that the fight is shifting towards the south, the game is changing. The support that the Navy might provide, both in terms of strike capabilities, as well as in supporting additional sort of logistical and supporting landings that might take place around the coastline. That was a role that certainly could be played. Crucially, there was a question about Odessa, depending on how far the Russians are trying to consolidate their position along the coastline of Ukraine. Odessa becomes an absolutely essential element of this story. But so far, this is all now in question because that precious air cover is missing. So from this perspective, that support element that the maritime dimension was going to have is now severely weakened. Now, has this been a point whereby symbolically something is going to change? Well, this is hard to say, and it depends very much on how we assess the land operations unfolding.
Professor, good to talk to you, and thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. Dr. Alessio Patalano, the Professor of War and Strategy at King's College in London.